Here, Ian Chappell's thoughts at the end of day 3 of the Sydney Test. And Ian, it was Alistair Cook who really set England up at the Gabba all those months ago, and now it looks like he's the man who sealed the Ashes for England.
Well, it's no coincidence that the one game that England lost was, well, not quite a double failure, but low scores in each innings for Alistair Cook. He really has anchored the England innings. He's played with such determination and concentration, and you could see him at the SCG really setting himself. Once he got the personal part of it out of the way and got to the 100, it was right, knuckle down and make sure that England have got a really big lead. And it was really a typical SCG day. I've always found at the SCG, when the sun's out, the batsmen generally have the better of the going, and that's the way it proved. But there was great determination today from from Alistair Cook to anchor the England innings.
He's now got 766 runs for the series, batted for 36 hours, or 6 days effectively. I mean, that's incredible concentration.
And he's up with some pretty good company in getting to that number of runs for the series. He's now second only to Walter Hammond for Englishmen in Australia during a series. I mean, he's not going to reach Walter Hammond because I think he got 905 in the series. But he went past Herbert Sutcliffe in the process. He went past Jack Hobbs in the process. And some of the very, very best batting names for England. So Alistair Cook will be pretty proud of that. Not so much while he's still playing. I mean, the big thing will be that they've won the Ashes, and it now looks as though they're going to win the series, which is what they really wanted to do after having gained the Ashes. But when he looks back in years after he's retired, to see his name up there with those sort of names in English batting, he'll be pretty proud of that.
We've talked a lot about how his technique has adapted since he was last out here, but how have Australia failed to adapt to his adaptations? I mean, could they have done more to try and stop him, or was he just in the zone in the series?
Well, I think if you look at his batting chart, that will perhaps be an indication that Australia haven't done all they could have, because out of the 700 odd runs that he scored, something like 35 runs have been scored straight down the ground. So, it's fairly obvious that the guy doesn't like to play there. First rule of Test cricket is if a guy doesn't like to do something, you try to make him do that. Make him do the things that he doesn't really want to do. Now, it may well have been that Alistair Cook would have adapted to that. But when a player does make improvements, make changes to his game, you as a bowling team have got to be quick to adapt to that, to the changes that he's made. And I don't think Australia have been quick enough to adapt to what Cook's done to improve his game.
Another man, of course, who got a century today, Ian Bell. He's looked threatening all series long and finally got his rewards, but not without a little bit of controversy along the way. What did you make of that UDRS decision on 67?
Well, it's far from a foolproof system, and at the moment, in my opinion, it's far from a good system. I mean, the question I would immediately ask was, when you're talking about an edge, if the guy knows that he hasn't edged it, surely he's just going to straight away give the sign of the tee and challenge. But when a batsman wanders over and has a bit of a chat to his teammate first and then says, I'll challenge, that's fine. With an LBW, you would expect that. What's the guy at the other end seen? But with a caught behind, or a caught with an edge, surely you know straight away whether you've hit it or not. To me, that was a bit of an indication that there might have been a little feather edge, which technology hasn't showed up. So, I still have this problem that I've had right from day one, from the moment they started talking about using the third umpire, way back, whenever that was. I've still got the same problem. If you're going to have justice, it's got to be justice for all, not justice for some. And I think what we're getting at the moment is we're getting random justice.
Nevertheless, his first Ashes 100 is a big moment for him, especially given that he had all those struggles against Shane Warne all those years ago. I mean, he's really developed as a batsman, hasn't he?
I think Bell's a very, very good player now. In fact, I think the time is right to move him up to number 3. I think all the things that he's got, I think, are ideal for number 3. The ideal number 3 to me is a guy who can counter-attack. He can play quick bowling well. He can take on short pitch stuff. And also he needs to have the ability to play spin bowling well, because you're expecting him, if he does survive an early wicket and start to get on top, you then want him to go on and get a big score. To do that, he's got to be able to play spin bowling. To me, Bell's got all of those things. I think more so than Trott. I think Trott would be, he'd be ideal at number 5. He's done very well at number 3. But I think the fact that Bell is a younger player and he's got all those attributes, I think he's proved to me in this series that he's now got the temperament to do it, and I think he would be ideal for number 3. I think England have made a big mistake in not pushing him up to 5 ahead of Collingwood. I think that's ludicrous, but they've got away with it. But Bell, I think they're not making full use of his talents if they don't push him up to number 3. I think he's a terrific player.
And talking of Collingwood, another failure today. It does look surely that this must be his final test. Is that your thought?
Well, it looked like a man, the way he got out, it looked like a man panicking a little bit. He looked as though he was desperate to do something, and when much wasn't happening, he decided, I've got to try and make something happen here. And it was it was quite a good piece of bowling. That was the good thing about it, that beat him in flight. But when you're beaten in the flight and you still try and hit over the top, it to me smacked of a bit of panic there. And Morgan, from everything I've heard about Morgan, he's got a lot of talent. I think now's probably the right time for him to prove one way or the other whether he can play the longer version of the game.
And just finally, what's your take on the captaincy of Australia so far? I mean, it's been a tough match, obviously, for Michael Clarke, but he looked as though he was trying to be proactive with bowling changes, in particular in the morning session.
Yeah, I mean, you're not really going to get a clear indication of how good Michael Clarke is as a captain until he is given the job in his own right, and it's his team. But he's done basically all he could do in this Test match. When you're rebuilding, and it's fairly obvious that Australia is going to have to do some rebuilding, the first thing that you've got to get right is your attack. Because if you go into a Test match with a decent attack, then you've got a chance of winning matches. And obviously, if you've got a decent attack, it's a lot easier to captain the side. So, Clarke has given indications that he's capable of doing the on-field part. What he's got to sort out now is his batting. He's got to make runs to go with the captaincy.